Now that you've generated your birth chart and started to learn about your planets, their placements in the houses and in the zodiac signs through the reference materials and the worksheets in the Astrology 101 quick reference guide, now it's time to get into something a little bit more complicated, which is figuring out where your aspects are, which planets in your birth chart are making specific angles with one another that do something, that tell a story, that make a significant impact in your life and in your direct experience. And if you haven't already done so, make sure you watch the first 2 tutorials in this series and download the Astrology 101 PDF guide because it's free. It is a quick reference guide that gives you everything you need to understand your planets, your zodiac signs, where they're placed, the houses, the planetary aspects, and so much more. It's a free resource. The link is down in the description below, and I'll also place the link for all of the other tutorials in this short series. All right, so let's get into it here. So first and foremost, we're going to talk about conjunctions. Conjunctions are really easy to spot in your chart because the planetary glyphs are going to be very close to each other in proximity within that inner wheel of your birth chart. That's how you spot a conjunction. Easy, right? You can see it with your eyes. There are 2 different types of conjunctions, sign-based and degree-based conjunctions. The sign-based conjunctions are literally when you have 2 or more planets, these glyphs that are in the same zodiac sign. So you can see here that we have Uranus, Saturn, and Venus, along with the asteroid series, which we don't really talk about in the Astrology 101 guide, but I do teach really in depth and in detail in my courses, including the Cosmic Academy of Astrology and my medical astrology course. And so this is what a conjunction looks like. There are multiple conjunctions within this birth chart. When the planets are close enough by degree to warrant a degree-based conjunction, that means that they're extra close in proximity. They are going to be extra potent with that melding of the 2 energies of the planets and their significations. And you'll be able to see it at the little table down below. The table down below only shows degree-based aspects. And the way that you read this table is very similar to what you're looking at here. You have to know the aspects glyphs. And you can see here that we have Venus at the top of the table. And then you go to the side and you see Saturn. And where Saturn and Venus merge within the table, there is the symbol for the conjunction. It's another way of reading this conjunction here in the birth chart between Venus and Saturn. You can also see that Ceres, which is the asteroid we just talked about, also aligns in a conjunction that's degree-based with Venus, because when you go to Ceres and you go to Venus and you find the place in the table where these 2 intersect, you see the conjunction symbol. And so that's another way of looking at it, not just in the birth chart, but in this table. So you can see if these are close in proximity, if they're stronger placements, if they're stronger conjunctions. All right, and then we have squares. Squares, as you know from the quick reference guide, are challenging aspects. They represent a point of tension within the birth chart. And so here you can see that we have 2 different alignments in square with Pluto. We have Mercury, which is in a wide square that's not actually going to show up in the key in that little table. And then we have the ascendant, which is in a very close square with Pluto. Square aspects are represented by red lines in the birth chart. And squares are always going to be between planets that are 3 signs apart. So you can see that we have Aquarius here, and then if you go back to Capricorn and then Sagittarius and then to Scorpio, you're going to see that they are, these planets are in square and these signs are in square with one another. Squares are always going to also be between 2 planets that are in signs that are of the same modality, cardinal, fixed, or mutable. They're not going to be in the same element, so they're not going to be in earth, air, fire, or water together, and they're not going to be in the same gender. So they have those 2 things in conflict, but they always share a modality. This square between the ascendant, which is in the sign of Aquarius, and Pluto, which is in the sign of Scorpio, is a fixed square. It is a fixed energy square. Going down to the table, you can see that where Pluto intersects with the ascendant, that abbreviation AC, you'll find the symbol, the glyph for square. This represents a tight square between the planet Pluto and the ascendant in this birth chart. Next, we have oppositions. Oppositions are a little bit more challenging, but they're considered to be more neutral than squares. Really, you have to understand the nature of the planetary energies and how they're interacting in order to understand the true nature of the opposition and whether it's going to be super difficult or whether it's going to be a little bit easier and cause less friction. This is something we teach really in depth in the Cosmic Academy of Astrology if you're someone who's interested in really understanding how to read a birth chart. But for the purpose of this for the purpose of the quick reference guide and what we're doing here, we're going to just kind of label oppositions as being mildly challenging and potentially having a little bit more friction. And so you can see here that we have Chiron in the sign of Gemini, and we have this stellium, this conjunction between Venus, Saturn, and also Uranus in the sign of Sagittarius. So when we have oppositions, the signs are going to be literally 6 signs or 7 signs, I should say, away from each other. So they're going to be an exact opposition of one another in the birth chart. They're going to be in the opposing signs. And so we have Gemini, which is the sign that opposes Sagittarius. When we look at oppositions, they're always going to be in the same gender. So we have 2 signs here that are considered to be masculine, and so they're going to have those things in common. They're also going to be in the same modality. So cardinal, fixed, or mutable. In this case, Gemini and Sagittarius are both mutable signs. And so this is a mutable opposition in the masculine signs. It's a more active energy. So looking at the little table at the bottom where it represents all of the different planetary aspects, you can see this shown in a different way. Chiron, which is the little symbol at the very right-hand side here, when it intersects with Uranus, Saturn, I accidentally circled Jupiter instead of Uranus. I apologize for that. And then Venus, you can see here down at the bottom where they intersect that there is the glyph for opposition. This means that with Venus, Saturn, and Uranus, they are in a close opposition, a degree-based opposition with the asteroid, the planetoid Chiron. All right, and now let's get into trines. So trine aspects are considered to be harmonious, as you've learned in the Astrology 101 Quick Reference Guide. Trines are always going to be 5 signs apart. So we have one here in the sign of Aries, and then if we go from Aries, number 1, to Pisces, number 2, to Aquarius, number 3, to Capricorn, number 4, and then to Sagittarius, number 5, we're going to see the planets that are in trine with one another. Just like with all aspects, you can have sign-based trines or you can have degree-based trines. Sign-based trines are when planets are in different signs of the same element. And that's what trines are typically going to be. They're going to be planets in the same element. They share that energy. So what they don't share is the same modality. So they're not going to be in the same either cardinal, fixed, or mutable, but they will be either earth, air, fire, or water trines. This particular trine between Mars and the North Node and Venus and Saturn and Ceres is going to be a fire trine because it's between planets in the sign of Aries and planets in the sign of Sagittarius, both of which are fire signs. Trines are represented by blue long lines in the chart that is generated through the free software via astro.com that we learned how to generate in the previous tutorial. So when we get into the little table at the bottom, trines are represented by a little triangle. That's the glyph. And so you can see here that between Venus and Mars, when those two planets intersect on the table, you get the trine symbol. When Venus intersects with the north node, you also get the trine symbol. And so you can see that these planets are in trine with one another. Then we have sextiles, which are also considered to be a positive energy, except they are a little less harmonious, a little less overt. They do represent an energy that is easier but requires some form of activation in order to manifest the positivity that is a potential with the sextile. And so in this chart, there are no sextiles between any planets besides Mars and also like Venus and Saturn and all that, and other bodies in the solar system and other calculations that we use in astrology. And so for the purpose of this demonstration, we're going to look at Mars and the North Node and the trine that they are making with Chiron. And so you can see here that when you have trines, they're always 3 signs apart. And so we have the Mars and North Node in Aries, that's number 1. And then we have Taurus, that's number 2. And then we have Chiron in the sign of Gemini, that's number 3. Sextile aspects are between planets that are of the same gender. And so you're always going to have them either as masculine or feminine, because we have Aries, which is a fire masculine sign, and we have Gemini, which is a air masculine sign. This is a masculine energy. Sextiles are not going to be in the same modality, and they're not going to be in the same element. And sextiles in the software on astro.com are represented by short blue lines. So you can see that here in this birth chart. And then when we get into the little table down at the bottom, the glyph for a sextile is a little asterisk, as you know from the free Astrology 101 quick reference guide. And so you can see here the little symbol for the North Node, the little horseshoe, aligns with Chiron. Where these two merge, there is a little asterisk that represents a sextile. And then finally, I always look at inconjunctions, also known as quincunx aspects, because they really pack a punch in the birth chart. They're considered to be minor aspects, but I think they're pretty major. In Hellenistic traditional astrology, these are known as aversions, when 2 planets are in signs that don't have anything in common. And when they are in this aversion by degree, when they are super, super close, within 2 or 3 degrees of being in this alignment, this is considered to be an inconjunction or a quincunx, which is an irritating energy where 2 planets just can't quite seem to sync up, and it causes a lot of psychological friction that reverberates into the physical manifestation. And so in this birth chart, you can see here we have the sun and we have the moon, and they are in an inconjunction, which is represented by a dotted green line in the software via astro.com. Inconjunct planets are always 6 signs apart. So we have the first one here, which is the moon in the sign of Leo. And then that is number 1, right? And then we have Virgo, we have Libra, we have Scorpio, we have Sagittarius, and then we have number 6, and that's going to be Capricorn, and that is where the sun lies. As I mentioned before, inconjunctions are 2 planets that are in signs that have nothing to do with each other. They have nothing in common. And so we have no common modality, cardinal, fixed, or mutable. We have no common element, earth, air, fire, and water. And they are in signs of completely different genders. And then the way that you view this in the table is by looking at, it looks like a little picnic table, right? If it's upside down, that's a little bit of a different aspect. What we're looking for here is the little green picnic tables. And so you can see very clearly here that where the sun glyph intersects with the moon glyph, there is the glyph for inconjunction, the little picnic table aspect. And so that's all of it. I hope you found this helpful in figuring out where the heck your aspects are so you can finish filling out the worksheets and working through the Astrology 101 quick reference guide. Again, if you haven't downloaded this, it's 100% free of charge. Link is down below. And thank you so much for watching this tutorial and downloading my guide.